Our guest is the chairman of the Institute for Reporters Freedom and Safety, Emin Huseynov. Welcome to our studio. Thank you. Today is the International Day of the Solidarity of Journalists. How is this day celebrated in Azerbaijan? This day is not celebrated in Azerbaijan solemnly. At least the figures show that the journalists and media outlets don't demonstrate remarkable solidarity on this day. Why? What's the reason? We suggest the reason is that a lot of mass media outlets in Azerbaijan are not financed in a transparent way. Therefore, they serve the interests of this or other organizations. And such media outlets cannot demonstrate true solidarity. And even by demonstrating solidarity, they show as if they are supporters of freedom of expression. But their mission is not the improvement of freedom of expression, but it is serving somebody's interests. Therefore, our number is decreasing. Another reason is that association factor has faded away in Azerbaijan. In other countries, the journalists are associated in difficult situations, but in our journalism there is a pessimistic atmosphere. When you ask the journalists why don't come to visit the graves of the journalists, they ask whether the freedom of expression will be improved by visiting the graves. And as a result of such a pessimistic approach, the number of our colleagues is decreasing. Earlier, there were clubs of editors, forums led by media leaders, where they made statements, sent signals to the government. But now they have disappeared. Why have they disappeared? What's the reason? The reason is that they have lost their economical independence and they are ruled by different oligarchs. And there are newspapers calling themselves as semi-independent, semi-oppositional newspapers, and they are accepted by the society as partly oppositional newspapers. But they are directly financed by non-transparent sources. And today we cannot enumerate more than 5 true oppositional newspapers in Azerbaijan. But 7 or 8 years ago there were about 15 or 20 editors who came together to express their opinions, make statements. Maybe some of them were dependent, but it was not seen clearly, directly like today. And let's admit that Najaf Najafov, Emin Huseynov, Hassan Bezaylabi and others are considered the symbols of Azerbaijan press. But there are also journalists who have been killed or murdered while carrying out their professional activity. But their graves are not visited today. What's the reason? I must say we have always commemorated visited the graves of killed journalists, as well as those who founded journalism. On such days like May 3rd, the World Day, the International Day of Freedom of Expression. On the 22nd of July, the 135th anniversary of Azerbaijan press, we visited the graves of Najaf Najafov, Chingiz Mustafayev, Emin Huseynov, Sultan Ascherov, Ali Mustafayev, and other journalists who were killed in Karabakh while carrying out their professional activity. As to why we visited Emin Huseynov's grave on this day, the reason is that this day Julius Fuchek was executed by German fascists. But before his death, he knew that he would be executed, and therefore he wrote a book, and this book was published after his death, and United Nations upon this day as the International Day of Solidarity of Journalists. That's why we decided to visit the grave of Emin Huseynov, a journalist who professionally carried out his work and was killed therefore. I must say that the journalists who have been killed in Karabakh were killed by the enemies, but Emin Huseynov has not been killed by the invaders. He was killed by our internal enemies, but he was killed in connection to an order made by persons within government, by persons who were supported by the authorities. And the reason why we state it today is that the Azerbaijan government is not eager to investigate the murder of Emin Huseynov. And as long as there is no democratic society, rule of law in Azerbaijan, or the government doesn't admit its mistakes, the murder will not be solved. And I believe that the authorities know who had made the order of Emin Huseynov's murder. And they don't want to investigate this because this is a black spot for them. And by not solving Emin Huseynov's murder, they make this black spot grow. They don't give necessary information to the society about the murder. The law enforcement bodies, the law enforcement agencies have stated the names of the killers of Emin Huseynov, but there have not been statements regarding who ordered the murder. And now another question. Today, an international public forum on supporting freedom of speech and expression is held in Azerbaijan. About 10 most popular international human rights organizations have visited Azerbaijan to support freedom of speech and expression. What do you think? Can these organizations contribute to the improvement of freedom of press, freedom of speech and expression in Azerbaijan? I think their direct mission is to impose pressure on Azerbaijan government for solving the Emin Huseynov's murder, find those who have ordered the murder. These organizations have great reputation in the world. They always have their arguments, evidences, and convince the Azerbaijan government to release the journalists and consolidate the freedom of expression in the country for the image of Azerbaijan. Another question is whether Azerbaijan government will listen to it or not. I have a pessimistic approach about it because the Azerbaijan government recently ignores these organizations, their calls, and the situation is getting worse. The European Court of Human Rights released a decision for immediate release of Emin Huseynov, but this time Emin Huseynov is accused of storing drugs. If this continues also in other countries such as Georgia, Moldova, it will result in decrease of trust in the European Court. Another question about solidarity of journalists, solidarity of Azerbaijan press. During the August War, Russia closed all the domains of Georgia, and all the information news regarding Georgia was disseminated in the world via Azerbaijan. And now Azerbaijan is able to deliver the information regarding national movement, freedom of media in Iran to the world. How do you see the situation of solidarity of Azerbaijan press in the future? How do you think, can it penetrate into Central Asia in future? I think it's time for fundamental changes. I think it's time for the media leaders to gather together, to associate together for common interests, and to hold meetings. And they must hold dialogues for sharing common interests. The government is closely following the internal affairs, internal processes. If it sees that there is a solidarity in the society, it takes some steps back. But if the government sees no resistance in the society, then there will be no use of international calls, and the government will continue ignoring the international organizations. And this forum being held today is a new chance for media outlets, both from the opposition and the government, to gather together and discuss this dangerous situation of freedom of expression in Azerbaijan. Thank you for coming to our studio. Thank you. Today our guest was the chairman of the Institute for Reporters, Freedom and Safety, Emin Huseynov. It was me, Taftuk Feradoglu, in the studio.